Oh, and good evening. It's July 31st, 2025, and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Donuts. As you know, we've created this section on the Dusty Feet to chat about all kinds of varying topics. Because many of the folks that I know, they often just hear me say, here's something to ponder, something to think about, and we'll probably need coffee and donuts just to talk about it. So tonight, let's chat about why, right? But not to answer some profound theological or existential conundrum, but just to consider why when we are asked why, or even ask why ourselves, perhaps we can receive and maybe ask that query from a different perspective. So let's open a discussion on why. Welcome to Coffee and Donuts on the Dusty Feet. Our hope with the Dusty Feet is to foster discussion and help build and support communities. If you are not already connected to a community or just want to share and interact, this community has 4 primary ways to interact. 1. DustyFeet.com. That's our primary place to find everything. You are always free to comment. 2. Facebook, at the Dusty Feet. These videos and other videos are also available for comment and discussion. And 3. We have a Discord channel. The invite link is there below. Be vocal, be written, be loving. And 4, and as always, you are welcome to send an email to bob@thedustyfeet.com. These places, they will be moderated, and guidelines will be set to ensure healthy, safe discussion. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation. Belief understandings may be challenged. Divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here in an environment of grace and love. And of course, before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, it's when you click the subscribe button. Those reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, please, that's when you click that like button, because that is how YouTube chooses to share these to more people. This is their thing, to share them with more if they wish. So why? It's an interesting little word. It's often followed by a question mark, and most often we tend to. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if it's cultural. I'm not sure if it's just has grown over time to become this. Yet we seem to respond to this question most often from a defensive posture. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why do you believe this? Why do you believe that? Why do you follow this God? Why even follow God? And then perhaps there's a related question, might even be attached to our interactive prayer practices. I mean, do we believe or even think that God would ask this question of us? I mean, we talk about this conversational prayer, so do we entertain the idea that God might ask the very same questions? Why? Why are you doing this or that, right? Is that why question then related to the traditional and non-traditional practices that we've grown up and been taught? You understand where I'm coming from? When we're asked why, our defensive posture rises. The hackles on the back of our necks perk up. Sometimes we get flushed. Sometimes we get flustered. We automatically go on the defensive. I agree. It's a loaded statement, meaning that some of the points I'm bringing up are broad strokes that address this not so simple topic, and I'm very aware of this, and I understand that in my time on this wonderful created planet that our Father has given to all of us, we interact with others, different humans, all the time, all around, and yet we often see this as the response to this question. I mean, because this question isn't always about deep theological thoughts, right? It can be as simple as a little child asking why. However, as we age, our response to that little word, for some reason, it prompts us to adopt a defensive posture. I'll wager that we might not have even considered also in that still small, quiet voice of God could be asking the same question. And to be fair, this varies depending on where you were raised, when you were raised, how you were raised, how your parents addressed this question, how they introduced you to this question, how they responded to this question. Add to that the influence of religious communities, academic institutions, and you have this little tiny contentious word of why. So I'm going to do my best to draw a picture that will maybe help us consider and understand a different perspective, one I've come to appreciate. It's something that I first thought about, the seed planted, not as a young child, but as a late teenager. And I'm not sure if I've mentioned all of this with the folks on the Dusty Feet before, but let me give you a little brief background of myself. I was born and raised in California. I had the luxury of having Ronald Reagan as governor in California during much of my youth, right? The education governor, right? And he was the education president. So I was the beneficiary of several educational programs under him during that time. And in that environment, it was a good question, a thoughtful, inquisitive one. It was trying to understand. It was an encouraged question in the circles that I was involved with, at least educationally, and all of those wonderful programs that I was privileged to be a part of. I've been the beneficiary of that. As I was growing up, I went to these classes in summer school. They weren't the remedial type, repeat English, repeat math. They were classes about horticulture, computer programming. This was before PCs, right? Graphic arts and design, theater production, all kinds of incredible places to ask why questions. Let's make a little left turn. So my dad, John Wern, you've met here on the Dusty Feet. For as long as I can remember, in my youth, right, he was a hair designer. He had other jobs before I was born, but during my childhood, my dad worked as a barber, a hair designer in California. He cut hair, right? He had the privilege of owning a couple of salons in California. He was both respected and profitable in that business. And I hadn't given much thought to following in my father's footsteps growing up, though. I didn't. I had other things on my mind, and that wasn't the primary objective, right? So I reached this point, the end of my schooling. Having graduated early, my initial intention was just take the summer off because I never had a summer off before. I never had any of that time off. I had been attended school during all this time. I'm essentially a year-round student. So my wonderful, encouraging mom said, well, I know you're not going to sit around all summer. So remember, I'm not 18 yet. And she brings up hair school. So somewhere along the line back, I had somehow mentioned being a hair designer as an option. And my mom, she just brought it up again. So I thought about it, decided to give it a try. I went to school to pursue this, I decided, because I truly admired what my dad did. I saw what he did. He seemed to enjoy it, I guess. Helps when you're good at it. That's a benefit. Even better, that your clients appreciated your work. And that I did notice. So, having decided to give it a try, I attended Roston School of Hair Design. I'm not sure if that school even still exists, but it was a nice one at the time, and I had some excellent instructors. So I'm in that. So all of that now seems like an awful lot of buildup, yes, to set this scene. All of that sets the stage for this scene. I'm in the kitchen at our house, cutting one of my friend's hair, still being a student, and my dad walks in, looks at what I'm doing, and he leans over my shoulder and he says, why are you doing that? Now, you can see that. Depending on how you interpret this, it can automatically put you in a defensive posture. Why are you doing that? Yes, the inflection is something to consider. It can be interpreted differently in different ways, depending how it's said. But he asked me, why are you doing that? Yes, I did get defensive. But as we walked through the conversation, my dad helped me realize that the why question, it was a positive one. I'll explain why. When he asked me why, and I explained why, and then he said, okay, so it sounds to me like you want to do this. So if you want to do that, then why are you doing this? So the question becomes, if I think I want to do something and I have an objective, why then am I doing what I'm doing now? So within the context of hair, if I'm doing something, will it enhance or detract from that particular look? If I'm cutting hair, not to get too technical, but if you pull hair in a specific direction, the weight will fall differently than if you pull the hair in another direction. The weight is going to make it fall differently. Okay. And somehow, unknowingly at the moment, it sparked a nibbling thought in the back of my head that has grown over the last 45 plus years. It's prompting me to ask myself the question, why? From a positive perspective rather than this negative one. Why am I doing that? In a good way. Because if I want to do something, then why am I doing it? So why are you doing that? That's it. Because of this or that or the other thing, but not from a defensive standpoint. Here's my end objective. At least this is what I think I'm doing. So why am I doing what I'm doing now? And it came to me after many years that I realized this conversation that had started this journey, and I'm looking back 45 years later at the healthiness of that discussion. Because at the time, I had no idea that this brief interaction in a kitchen in Chatsworth, California would have such a profound impact on my life so many years later. The why question became not defensive, but rather childlike, inquisitive. It also helped me understand why I do what I do, what my results are, what my intention is. Okay, so now sometimes this can be perceived as defensive because when asking people why they do something, sometimes they may not understand the underlying result. I understand that. Do we even think we know why we do what we do? After all, if I'm not comfortable with that result because I'm not comfortable with where I think I am, and I'm just doing this because somebody told me, then my answer, because somebody told me this, whatever that might be, could go negatively. I mean, and this encompasses everything from practical demonstrations to in-depth biblical and theological discussions. We have a part of us that when we ask the why question, we automatically become defensive because we want to be right in our own why. Does that make sense? I want to answer the question so that I get the right answer in your eyes. Yeah. Perhaps we can start maybe though now to look at this question a little differently, especially to say, this is why I do what I do. For instance, in the case of hair, I said, I want to do this. And then my dad said, good. That seemed like a good reason. He was encouraging on what I was doing. And I became inspired by that. I was encouraged by it. I knew what I wanted to do. And then I did it. So my dad, with many more years of experience, asked me why I was doing what I was doing. I spent more time listening. So I tell him why. Because of the intended result, right? Dad doesn't know my result. He doesn't know where I want the haircut to go. He doesn't know what the final style will be. So when he asks me this, and I say, based on what I want to do, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So when people ask me, I'm going to make a left turn back, right? They ask me why questions, especially from our believing side of the equation, because I love this, right? The why question now, when I'm asked, I'm not defensive about it. Part of that is because I'm willing to take the time to look back ask myself that question first. Why am I doing this? Why am I following the God that I follow? It's a fair question. It's an interesting one that people ask in varying, nuanced ways. They ask this question in roundabout ways as well. Why God? And within that, I think there's another parallel journey that began, exploring the possibility that God is asking me the same question. That quiet voice, why? This is from why I chose him to why I continue to follow him and why I do what I do as I live my daily life. Yeah. Think about that. So in the next episode, right, we're going to explore some of the whys and we're going to examine how our pasts, marked by our brokenness, may have led us to shy away from this question, the same one we hear, the same one we ask people, but we just shy away from God and others. So thanks for being with us tonight on another Coffee and Donuts discussion. This just means we get to talk amongst ourselves here at the Dusty Feet. So shalom, shalom to you all, and good evening.